So my original plan was to get in on that trend of redesigning Pokemon based on their abilities, and that's something I may or may not want to do on my own time in the future. But after last month, coming off of designing 8 new Fakemon, then getting a couple Etsy orders in the middle of that, and then having some family health scares in the middle of that, I'm not really up to doing anything super strenuous right now. I started to. I had some ideas laid out, but when I sat down to sketch them, I just came up with nothing. I was getting frustrated until I just thought, why not do something you actually want to do? It's not like I wasn't interested in trying to design an ability form. It's a really cool concept, and the first time I saw some, I did want to give it a shot myself, and I thought it would be a decent chill project to tackle, but then I chose some near impossible abilities to design for. I somehow made myself angry trying to draw Superior and failing, and Superior is not even close to being a hard Pokemon to draw, so my enthusiasm for trying this nearly fizzled out. So needless to say, I was not gonna do that. But for some reason, starting on this reminded me of an idea I kept trying to flesh out a few years ago, and I just never kept up with it. See, when I was younger, I used to be pretty interested in dog shows. And before anyone wants to come at me, yes, I'm well aware of the ethical concerns surrounding dog shows and breeders. When I was a child, I had no idea. I just saw pretty dogs and was intrigued. Back when Animal Planet actually had animal-related content, and I'm saying this like I have any idea what they're showing now, but after having multiple reality-type shows and paranormal shows, it's not like I really believe they've gone and become an animal-centric channel again. I pretty much watched every dog show they ever aired. I got really into learning about purebred dogs and dogs in general, because you see, little Sombra was terrified of dogs, and learning about dogs helped me to not be so scared of them. But what does that have to do with Pokemon, you may be thinking? I'm getting there, so hold on. I started thinking about the Pokemon world having an equivalent to dog shows. I guess you could say that contests are, but contests seem to have more in common with a beauty pageant or talent show than a dog show. What I mean by an equivalent to a dog show is, what if the Pokemon world had some sort of competition where Pokemon breeders specialize in a specific Pokemon, hold them against a written standard, and they're competing to see which Pokemon is the best example of their standard. So today, we're going to be designing wild and show forms for each Pokemon. It's not so much designing on the wild Pokemon's end as it is just kind of drawing them in my style and giving them details that I think would be beneficial to them in the wild. My guinea pig for this entire thing has always been Deino. I'd come up with the idea around the time of Deino Community Day in Pokemon Go, so if you play the game, you have an idea of how long I've been sitting on this. I got into a phase of just drawing Deino a lot, and wanted to draw it closer to how it's described in its dex entry. And then I just wanted to play around with the idea of dog shows and kennel clubs existing in the Pokemon world, so I decided to tackle a cleaned up show-worthy version of it. In its dex entry, Deino is described as having a lot of wounds. This is because it has absolutely no vision and uses its mouth and body to explore its surroundings, so it bites and tackles things in its environment. While it doesn't specify if it also instigates fights with other wild Pokemon, it is classified as the irate Pokemon, so I wouldn't be surprised if it did. This is something I wanted to reflect in a quote-unquote wild Deino design. A body covered in old scars and scratches, as well as a rougher, more unkempt mane because, well, it's wild and doesn't have a human hand to make the fur, or feathers, I've never been sure what it is, lay flat. The biggest change I made, though, was in giving it a naturally long tail, though due to its propensity for injury, their tails are often bitten off or broken, and they're left with the more commonly seen nubs. New and younger trainers are advised against training Deinos, as they may not be able to handle their volatile temperaments, and because Deinos explore the world through biting and tackling, many inexperienced trainers don't fully know what it takes to train them. Dinos bred for show are not too different. Breeders still expect them to be rambunctious, but they are rigorously trained out of their most violent habits early. They still are not recommended for inexperienced trainers, however training a show dino tends to be a little easier as the breeder will have done a lot of the heavy lifting. Visually, there are three major differences between wild and show dinos. Firstly, the meticulously groomed mane. This is standard. The spots on the mane tend to be more uniform than the spots wild dinos sport. Second, when in their stack position, they have a noticeable slope in their backs. It's slight, but it's still there. And third, their tails are docked. This is purely cosmetic. There is a fourth detail about them that differs from their wild counterparts, and that is their coloration. Typically, Pokemon have two colors, their normal, everyday ones, and their shiny variation that is extremely rare. But just like show animals have standardized coat colors, so would show Pokemon. Personally, my headcanon for most Pokemon is that they can come in a variety of colors and patterns. In the anime, we see shinies and their standard colors, but there's occasionally a random off-color Pokemon in the background here and there, or sometimes in the foreground. The most notable example of off-color Pokemon being the pink Butterfree from back in the day. Seeing that Pokemon can just come in more than two colors is pretty cool, and I get why it can't really be done in the games, but for illustration and animation, it's all fair game. In addition to their standard and shiny coloration, show dinos also come in a dark morph. It's either a very dark blue or blue-black with a fully black mane and slightly darker spots. And on top of this, breeders have found a way to breed Deino with light stripes that mimic the look of scarring, so all the variations can come with these stripes. Of course, the hardest to breed for would be the shiny with the stripes or scarring. Let's tackle one more Pokemon to round this video out. And I may have gotten a bit carried away with this one, but it's a little easier to conceptualize it as a show dog because, well, it's a dog. I figured it'd be pretty fun to tackle Growlithe, but in doing so I knew I had to also tackle its Hisuian variant as well, so my work was cut out for me. Will I ever actually come up with a not-so-taxing video idea? Maybe, but clearly today wasn't that day. Anyways, I've got to admit that I wasn't 100% sure on what I wanted the differences between a show and wild Growlithe to be. You know, sometimes you get really stuck on art, and maybe this is just because I've been making way more stuff lately than I'm used to. I set the goal of a video a month, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem like a lot when you see bigger creators knocking out videos every day or week, but it was what felt sustainable to me. So I just kinda drew what I could think of at the moment, so bear with me. Wild Growlithes have three things that separate them from show Growlithes. First, their head and neck fur are separated. I mean, that's just typically how Growlithe is drawn, so it's no different from how it normally looks. Second, their ears are floppy. This is purely self-indulgent. Growlithe is classified as the puppy Pokemon, and typically puppy ears are a bit floppier than when they're adults. It felt fitting that Growlithe would keep the puppy-eared look into adulthood. And thirdly, they have not straight tails. I'm not really sure how to describe the look of Growlithe's tail normally. It's upright, but has a bit of a curve downward at the tip. Something like that. Either way, it's different from what I gave to the show Growlithe. Show Growlithe's head and neck fur are connected. Growlithe and Arcanine are based on Shisa, and those are sort of a mix between a dog and a lion. The statues show they have pretty much a full lion mane, so that's what I gave to the Growlithe to give it a lion-esque silhouette. The ears are cropped to the typical square shape it has in canon, and their tails are curled over their back, sort of like an Akita. I always thought Growlithe and Arcanine looked kind of like Akita Inu, so yeah. And show Growlithe have been bred to have slightly different coat types, at least with their longer fur. The tails and manes can be curly. This is to sort of bridge the gap between Hisuian and Cantonian Growlithe. The idea is there, but I want to go back and really revisit this and make it better. Speaking of Hisuian Growlithe, there's not too much difference here except the floppy to cropped ears and the mane and head rocks, I guess, being connected. These guys also get different coat patterns and colors too, but for the sake of openness, I wasn't completely sure how far I wanted to go with the colors and patterns and the like, so I just did the normal and shiny colors and gave them each a brindle pattern. I think that maybe I'd like to go back and give it some other patterns that are more reminiscent of Akita or other similar dog breeds, or even tigers or lions, because I think breeders would absolutely want a variety of colors and markings. This is mostly a silly little idea I've had for a while, and I'll probably slowly expand on it. Let me know what you think. If I do continue with this idea, I feel like I'd want to write it out as if I were some kind of Pokemon breeder or show association head and go from there. Or maybe I'll actually just keep it as writing and make a dedicated blog or website for this. I don't know. I just know I want to do more with this concept. But yeah, that's it for this month. Nothing super detailed, and I'll see you next month for another video.